Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host, Leanne Hughes.
Hey, it's Leanne Hughes from the First Time Facilitator podcast. As you know, I've got a bit of a spin-off group called the Flip Chart. And I had a flip charter and previous guest of the show, Oscar Trimboli, reach out this morning. I think it was probably 4 hours ago. This is about how we're moving with imperfect action. He's reached out to ask me a really specific question about Zoom. So Oscar, can you explain first of all, what you reached out about and why?
Yeah, so I was planning to do a face-to-face workshop for 2 hours tomorrow from noon till 2 p.m., which was a lunch and learn with a group of executives. There's about 14 of them in this leadership team. And I just went, oh my God, I can't do that because I do that as a pairing up exercise. And if I do that in Zoom, it's just going to go berserk. Nobody's going to be able to hear. And then I discovered there's breakout rooms. So that's a place where you can go and have these conversations. But that got me thinking before I jumped into the tech, if we think about audience first and what they're trying to achieve, why would I use breakout rooms? How would I use breakout rooms? What's the right format and what isn't? When should I use them? Where should I use them? So, I'm sure between the two of us we'll figure this out, and I don't expect that everyone's got the answers. But I also know that the flippers on the Facebook group ask some more questions and probably more interesting ones than me.
I love that community for that reason. Like I'll put up some things and just to see where it can go, where it can spin off and get the collective intelligence of the group. And as you said, we popped it on the flip chart today and there's been questions about how do you annotate on whiteboards and share that back. And so it's really driven an awesome conversation. So thanks so much for you reaching out. I've used breakout rooms before and I think it's really exciting that you're using it, particularly for a paired activity. How did you see it working for your group tomorrow? I mean, how does it work in your face-to-face environment?
Yeah, they're put into paired groups to ask a very specific question. So an example of the question would be, what do you struggle with when it comes to listening? And they're asked that through three domains. How do you struggle when you listen in one-on-ones, in team meetings, and with customers? So that's the context. It's a dirty little trick though, because it's actually a listening exercise disguised.
Very smart. That's what great facilitators do is that's kind of ninja level facilitation is weaving through the lesson in the activity.
Yeah. So we will debrief their content, but then I will debrief how did you go with your listening.
Okay. Well, I mean, that will work beautifully in breakout rooms. So I think the concept will work really well. I had Jonas Rianto on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's affectionately known as the remote meeting guy. And he specifically talked about the type of instruction you give before you go out into a breakout.
Yeah.
And the thing that I picked up from him is to keep it really simple and to be very directional, give your instructions very clearly. So what I probably suggest, and you maybe have thought about this, is instead of giving them all three questions at the same time, is giving one question, then breaking them out and giving them a time limit, then bringing them back, maybe assigning them to somebody different for the second question, and then the third. I also listened to Jenny Blake. I talk about her a lot. She recently did a podcast on minimizing screen fatigue. I've certainly had Zoom fatigue. Fatigue. How about you, Oscar?
Amen. I was just talking to my wife about it. We booked a lunch date today. We had to go downstairs and book lunch, and we both had a sandwich together. It was just so nice to not be processing everything around the screen.
I know, and to stare at that little dot on a screen like that, it's not good for your neck and for your posture either.
You notice I'm using a stand-up desk, Leanne.
Oh, very jealous. I'd actually did a big speech on stand-up desks. The irony is I'm on a sit-down one at the moment. But she said she had a really good idea about collecting information. So she used to work for Google and they had Google Sheets or Google Docs going on in the background, a collaborative live document. So your team, Microsoft, I realise, So surely there might be a Teams thing that you can use, but
no, this is we're all the worlds are connected. Whatever technology the client uses, I'll use. So talk me
good.
through the way you build an artifact, because that's one of my concerns, is coming back into the room and doing the report back. And I know I've got a fatal assumption that we need to come back into the room to do the report back, as opposed to, hey, reflect on the document in the second half of your breakout, where you're noticing what other people are capturing in that document as well. So straight away, you've created a distinction for me in thinking about before, during, and after. It actually could happen relatively simultaneously by capturing it in a doc as well. Somewhere else I've seen they've used Mentimeter, where they can use polling concepts as well for the report back. But it's a relatively small and intimate group, so I always have a bias towards the report back, so the group can again get into dialogue, so I can make a listening reflection back to the room about how people were listening while that was happening. So I'm curious if you have a perspective about the relative trade-offs of creating a document, doing the report backs, because I sense one of the things that's happening with the external context at the moment, our patience is low. So we don't want to wait. And how do we bend time?
I've also noticed that a lot of activities in a face-to-face environment go a lot quicker than just because you only have one person to listen to at a time. So I guess the irony with your topic is about listening, and we actually can only listen to one person at a time, and so it's picking up on those cues as well. I would say I always go back to my philosophy on workshop design, which is contrast. So for every breakout, I wouldn't rely on the document. I would do one with a document, then I would come back, and then I would do one with, okay, now everyone share. And then I would go, right, now when we come back, the person that has worked here the longest out of your pair will have to share back. So just try to give different triggers to keep them to get on their toes, keep it. I always talk about unpredictability as well, because I think if it's like, all right, we do a breakout and then you come back and look at the doc, that will get pretty repetitive pretty soon as well. And that's something that Michael Bungay-Stanier said on our interview, is he made it fun when he had paired activities. He'd always say, right, the person with the longest hair, you report back first. So you got to think of, okay, what's the cue for people that are online? And where I was going to add something to that. But I think there's also a neat tool in terms of that broadcasting tool that you can have when people are in breakout rooms. So you can say, right, in 2 minutes, one person in your partnership is going to report back the top 3 things you spoke about. So it gives them a heads up on timing, it's instructional, and they're aware of their responsibility when they get back.
Great. All right. Just thinking quickly, because we want to do an espresso shot for the flippers, thinking about why, how, what, when, and where, before, during, and after. Any eyes you want to pick out of that? Anything else you think I need to think about given my context?
Yeah, I think I think the why is really important. So go back to the fundamentals of the way that you design the activity for face-to-face and think, is this an essential thing for virtual, knowing that time might be limited? Also, another thing to consider is video. What's your stance on video? Are you making this mandatory for tomorrow?
It's going to be a question I'm asking the group. So I think it'd be interesting how they show up. My sense is they're probably a video first culture, because distributed working is the way they work, but they come together on a monthly basis. They have people dispersed not only across the country but around the world. So I'm sensing they're probably okay with video. If I see lots of audio onlys, I might ask the group to think about what video can contribute to listening during the conversation. And whenever I've done that, it's like the lights on the lighthouse all kind of start to light up there, and people go, yeah, non-verbals matter. So the non-verbals as thumbnails aren't as great, but it's always a great conversation starter to say, wow, what a beautiful work of art you have behind you. And then they tell you they spent 3 years in Mexico on an artist collective, and it starts a very interesting conversation there.
I agree. You can definitely sort of riff off the visuals in terms of, we had a really fun conversation around the coffee mugs that we'd brought to our virtual and what they meant to us. That was from a fellow flip chart, Anish, that suggested that. So let's talk about your confidence on these breakouts for tomorrow. Where do you think you'd sit from 1 to 10? 10 being just so confident, 1 being I'm still quite nervous.
Before this call, I was a 3. After this call, I'm a 7, and I have found anybody online on Facebook at the moment and said, "Are you free in 45 minutes? Because I need to trial breakout rooms." And they've all gone, yeah. So I'm just going to do that for 15 minutes to really just understand the mechanics of it, which I can figure that bit out. But your genius, your amazing global thought leadership is around thinking about the context. And I'm really grateful to be part of your community. I hope this helps other people improve the new way of work.
I think so. I think it will. And thanks so much for popping the question up. And always good to chat to you, Oscar. All the best for tomorrow. Let us know how it goes.
Thanks for listening.
And look, if you're still listening in the meantime, if you do like the show, I'd love you to help out and get the word out to other people. So there are a few ways you can spread the word. You can simply send them a link to firsttimefacilitator.com or leave a rating and review in iTunes to boost the public presence of the show. Thanks, First Time Facilitators. Chat next week. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Nice one, Leanne.